Imagine standing paralyzed before a living mountain of flesh and bone, a beast over 15 feet tall whose very roar shakes the dust from the earth beneath your feet. Realizing that this is not a scene from a forgotten mythology or a child's fable, but the suppressed reality of the ancient world described in the Holy Scriptures. Hidden within the biblical texts lie the terrifying records of the Nephilim, hybrid monsters born of a forbidden union between fallen angels and human women. Creatures who did not vanish entirely with the Great Flood, but returned to wage a spiritual war against God's people. We are about to unveil the dark secrets of these giant races, revealing a lineage of corruption that challenges everything you thought you knew about history. But before we unlock these forbidden archives and journey into the shadows of the past, I invite you to stand with us in the search for truth by liking this video to help spread this message, sharing this revelation with fellow believers, and subscribing to Guardians of the Covenant to join our growing community of truth seekers. Brace yourself and prepare your mind, for the truth about these ancient entities is far more disturbing and powerful than you ever imagined. The giants described in the Bible have always been a subject of deep mystery and fascination, capturing the imagination even of those who have never turned the pages of the Old Testament. Yet these colossal figures who once walked with heavy steps upon our earth remain an enigmatic presence in ancient records, and a truth that few realize is that these giants did not form a single monolithic race, but were distinct tribes and lineages, all tracing their dark heritage back to the Nephilim. Each of these races possessed unique, terrifying characteristics and played crucial roles in the tapestry of biblical history. And in this journey together, we will delve into the ancient scrolls to reveal exactly who these mysterious post-flood giant races were. Get ready to uncover hidden truths that have been obscured by time, for after the cataclysm of the Great Flood, the book of Genesis chapter 6 presents one of the most puzzling and fascinating passages of the Holy Scriptures regarding the appearance of the giants, where the sacred text describes the sons of God, who, upon seeing the daughters of men and recognizing their beauty, decided to take them as wives, creating a hybrid lineage known as the Nephilim. These beings, giants in both stature and power, inhabited the earth before the flood, but mysteriously, they reappeared after the waters had receded, raising the burning question of who these sons of God really were, a mystery unlocked by the Hebrew term Bene Ha-Elohim, which suggests they were not merely humans of extraordinary stature, but rather a hybrid race resulting from a forbidden union between fallen angels and human women. These angels, known in ancient traditions as the Watchers, had abandoned their heavenly posts and, corrupted by desire, sought to interact with humanity in unholy ways, placing the giants not only as colossal beings, but as corrupted forces originating from the very spiritual chaos that preceded them. The biblical account reveals that before the flood, these creatures multiplied in number and power, spreading terror, corruption, and violence across the planet, becoming an essential part of the chaotic scene that led to the divine judgment and the great flood that purified the earth. However, the question still persists, echoing through the corridors of history. How did these beings manage to reappear after the flood? While the answer is not unanimous, many scholars believe that even with the destruction of the original Nephilim bodies, the spiritual influence of the fallen angels continued to exert power over humanity. Their presence in subsequent periods, disguised in various forms, infiltrating ancient civilizations and creating new generations of Nephilim, which explains the continuity of this demonic presence and the emergence of new manifestations of corruption and spiritual decay. Furthermore, historical and biblical accounts point to the involvement of these beings in pagan cults, where they were associated with priestesses who worshipped ancient gods, entities the Bible repeatedly warns were not mere human inventions but demonic entities in disguise whose main intention was to infiltrate religious practices and gain worship and power. This phenomenon was not limited to the Old Testament alone, for in the accounts of Moses and Aaron before the Egyptian pharaoh, the Egyptian magicians were able to perform supernatural feats, highlighting the presence of dark forces operating through them and suggesting that contact with the supernatural and with malevolent entities continued to shape humanity's destiny. The crucial point that stands out here is the idea that although many consider these stories as mythology, there are strong indications that the beings mentioned, though invisible to our eyes today, continue to influence the world in ways far more subtle and powerful than we can imagine. The presence of the Nephilim represents how supernatural forces can interfere in human history, for the giants were a direct reflection of celestial rebellion, a visible mark of corruption originating from the fallen angels. The divine judgment of the waters was not the end of the Nephilim, but rather an interval, for soon after, a new generation of giants appeared, spreading across different regions of the Middle East and beyond, described by the Bible as imposing warriors who established strategic domains and became great threats to the surrounding peoples, including Israel itself. The scriptures reveal that at least 5 races of giants inhabited the vast region stretching from the Levant to Mesopotamia, with their descendants founding strongholds and building fortified cities that became insurmountable obstacles for the peoples who sought to expand their territories. One of the most impactful accounts is found in the book of Numbers, chapter 13, when the Israelites were sent to spy on the land of Canaan and were terrified upon encountering the descendants of Anak, describing them as creatures so enormous that the Israelites saw themselves as mere grasshoppers, an account that illustrates not only the physical size and power of these creatures, but also the psychological and moral impact they caused, generating panic and discouragement among the Hebrews. The fear caused by the sight of the giants almost led the Israelites to abandon their conquest of the Promised Land, revealing that they were not just a physical threat, but also a symbol of the spiritual struggle between good and evil, suggesting that the battle for the Promised Land was not only territorial, but also a profound spiritual war for divine sovereignty over humanity. In the next segment of our journey into the forbidden history of the ancient world, we will continue uncovering the 5 races of giants mentioned in the scriptures, exploring their dark origins and the profound significance of the names given to them by ancient peoples, for each colossal tribe possesses a unique story that extends far beyond their imposing stature, reflecting supernatural influences and cosmic forces that challenged human comprehension and threatened the very order of God's creation. The first and perhaps the most notable race of giants recorded in the scriptures is the Rephaim, colossal beings who stand among the most enigmatic and feared entities in biblical history, often associated with the shadowy domain of the dead. The name Rapha, the singular form of Rephaim, carries profound meanings that evoke a chilling connection with the afterlife, for in both Hebrew and Phoenician, the term does not merely refer to giants of flesh and blood, but rather to entities that inhabit the threshold between the world of the living and the world of the dead, existing almost like specters or wandering souls that have crossed the forbidden boundaries of the physical world. But why did the ancients view the Rephaim in this ghostly way? The answer dates back to the cataclysm of the Great Flood, a divine event that, according to scriptures and ancient traditions, was sent to wipe out the giants from the face of the earth, eradicating these beings who had multiplied and spread terror with the cleansing power of divine waters. However, after the waters calmed and the earth dried, these creatures returned in a mysterious and terrifying manner, a resurrection made possible because accounts from ancient civilizations indicate that the fallen angels, those powerful beings who had rebelled against God, continued to interact with humans, returning to unite with mortal women and generate a new generation of giants that perpetuated the accursed lineage of the ancient Nephilim. The stature of the Rephaim defied any human concept of greatness, for they were true titans, creatures of proportions that seemed supernatural, and one of the greatest examples of this colossal race is Og, the king of Bashan. whose measurements impressed even the oldest records, with estimates placing him at around 15.4 feet tall and nearly 6.6 feet wide, making him a true mountain of flesh and bone whose very shadow would cast darkness over entire armies. As we stand together revealing these ancient truths that have been hidden for millennia, I invite you to join our mission of discovery by liking this video and subscribing to Guardians of the Covenant, becoming part of a community dedicated to uncovering the mysteries of the Bible that others are afraid to touch. Alongside the Rephaim, the second race of giants to traverse the lands of Canaan and spread to other regions, were the Anakim, the feared descendants of Anak, colossal beings who were known for their immense stature and unbeatable power. Yet unlike the Rephaim, whose name evoked the dead, the name Anakim carries a disturbing revelation about their origin, derived from ancient Sumerian where Anak or Anunnaki means sons of those who fell from the sky, shedding a dark light on their origins and implying that they were direct descendants of the ancient gods or entities that fell from the heavens. These supernatural beings, often identified as fallen angels or pagan deities, descended to earth defying divine laws to establish a new lineage, granting the Anakim a direct connection with the spiritual world and an authority over humans that was cemented by their terrifying height, which exceeded ordinary men by more than 6 to 10 feet, with some estimates suggesting they reached heights between 11 and 14 feet tall. This colossal height made them a formidable threat, rivaling the Rephaim, and they represented a dangerous mix of human and supernatural forces, a heritage of rebellion against divine order that made them symbols of resistance to celestial authority and a continuous threat to humanity, reminding us that evil forces were always lurking to corrupt God's creation. If the Anakim were feared for their celestial lineage, there was a third race that terrorized the Middle East and spread panic throughout the Levant, the Emim, whose mention in the book of Deuteronomy describes them as a people as great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim, probably surpassing 13 feet in height. Known for their monstrous stature, the name Emim, according to ancient interpretations, translates to the terrors or the monstrous ones, a term that reflected not only their terrifying appearance but also the profound psychological impact they caused, for what truly distinguished them was a physical and behavioral trait that froze the bravest warriors in fear: their roar. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus describes the Emim as having a roar so terrifying that it could be compared to the roar of a lion, a guttural and fierce sound that, combined with their grotesque and distorted features, created a wave of visceral panic that paralyzed entire civilizations, marking their existence not just by physical strength, but by their ability to instill a primal fear that left an indelible mark on the collective memory of the ancients. Finally, the fourth race of giants that ravaged the Middle East was the Zuzim, giants who, although not as well known as the Emim or Anakim, appear in the pages of ancient records as one of the colossal races that dominated the region, bearing a name derived from Aramaic interpreted as the rigid, the strong, or the robust, a description that reflects both their impressive stature and their superhuman strength as they roamed the earth with brutal force. Continuing our descent into the ancient chronicles, reports indicate that the Zuzim were titans between 9.8 and 13.5 feet tall, positioning them as colossal entities who roamed the earth with brutal force, leaving a trail of trembling legends in their wake. For like the other giants mentioned in the sacred texts, the Zuzim were part of the mysterious and dark lineages of supernatural beings that permanently marked ancient history. The presence of the Zuzim, although not as thoroughly documented in popular culture as that of the Anakim or the Emim, is vividly recorded in the book of Genesis chapter 14, where they are mentioned in the violent context of the war waged between Chedorlaomer, the ruthless king of the Elamites, and various other rebellious tribes, a conflict during which Chedorlaomer led a devastating military campaign against the tribes of the region. And the Zuzim, who inhabited the territory of Ashtaroth-Karnaim, became some of the primary victims of this overwhelming offensive. The massacre of these giants, which marked one of the many bloody episodes of the ancient war between human forces and giant clans, resulted in the diminishing of their presence in the ancient world, weakening their influence and spreading the seeds of their downfall across various lands. Yet the defeat of the Zuzim was not just an isolated military event, but part of a series of battles that reflect the ongoing and eternal struggle between human forces and supernatural entities. The fall of the Zuzim represents symbolically a temporary victory for humanity over the giants, but it also raises profound questions about how present these supernatural beings were in the daily lives of the ancients, and how their influences continued to affect the fate of civilizations long after their physical bodies had fallen. For the presence of giants in ancient traditions, especially in the biblical scriptures, was never merely a matter of physical size or battle power, but rather these colossal beings represented something greater: the terrifying presence of cosmic and supernatural forces that defied natural and spiritual laws. Each of the giant races, from the Rephaim to the Zuzim, carried with them a set of unique characteristics that reflected different aspects of evil, corruption, and destruction that permeated the world after the flood. And as the giants were defeated and their lineages became extinct, their names and legacies continued to echo through traditions, reminding the ancient peoples that no matter how much human nature tried to resist, the supernatural forces were still active, influencing and shaping history in an enigmatic and often terrifying manner. The last race of giants mentioned in the Old Testament is one of the most mysterious and little known, the Zamzummim, who inhabited the lands of the Middle East, more specifically east of the Jordan River, emerging as the last vestige of the feared lineages of colossal beings that had dominated vast regions for generations. Although briefly mentioned in the scriptures, the story of the Zamzummim is shrouded in deep mystery, with few details known about their origin and their fall. Yet, like the Zuzim and the Emim, the Zamzummim were described as giants of imposing stature and immense strength, with ancient records suggesting that these giants were between 13.1 and 14.8 feet tall, placing them among the largest and most physically intimidating of all the races mentioned in biblical traditions. The similarity with other tribes of giants in the region is evident, as they were known for their brute strength and the fierce presence they commanded in their territories, establishing themselves as one of the last colossal tribes to inhabit the earth before their eventual extinction. For the Zamzummim were formidable warriors whose presence was a constant threat to neighboring tribes, occupying strategic lands and asserting their control over the communities that dared to approach. However, as in many other giant stories, the tide of history was relentless, and the Bible describes how the Ammonites, the descendants of Lot, came into direct conflict with the Zamzummim, fighting for the fertile lands that once belonged to these giants. And in this biblical account, the Ammonites were able to defeat the Zamzummim and take their lands, gradually erasing any trace of the ancient race in a conflict that is significant because it marks the end of the great giant lineages in the Middle East, with human tribes emerging as the victors. With the defeat of the Zamzummim and the Ammonites taking possession of their lands, the era of giants came to a close, symbolizing the transition from the old order dominated by supernatural and colossal beings to a new time in which humans took control of the lands and civilizations began to expand. Many scholars suggest that the Zamzummim were a subdivision of the Rephaim, meaning that their lineage not only occupied the territory east of the Jordan, but also other regions such as Syria and parts of what is now Israel, a hypothesis suggesting that in the distant past, vast areas of the Middle East were dominated by these giants, and that the Zamzummim might have been one of the last manifestations of this ancestral race, hunting and being hunted until their extinction. Additionally, some scholars believe the name Zamzummim may be related to the Hebrew word meaning conspirators or plotters, suggesting that in addition to their immense physical strength, The Zamzummim were also known for their strategic cunning and ability to form treacherous alliances, implying that their fall was not merely the result of the brute force of the Ammonites, but also a reflection of political manipulation and alliances with other forces. With the final defeat of the Zamzummim, one of the last giant lineages of the Old Testament was eradicated. Yet the story of these giants, though shrouded in mystery, reflects the constant struggle between humans and the supernatural forces that preceded them, for the wars and conflicts described in the Bible were not only physical battles, but also symbolic representations of a spiritual struggle for sovereignty over the earth. The extinction of the Zamzummim and the subsequent fall of other giant tribes marked the end of an era. But the legends of these colossal beings persist to this day, fueling the collective imagination and reminding us that deep within human history, there has always been a struggle between men and the forces of a world beyond our own. And though these beings have vanished, their presence and influence still echo in the shadows of ancient collective memory. If you have been moved by these revelations and wish to continue exploring the hidden truths of the Bible with us, please like this video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to Guardians of the Covenant so you never miss an update. And may God bless you and keep you until we meet again in the next video.